Okay,
Great.
I am totally fangirling. Bowen Yang is such a hero of mine and so many of us. And I
I
just
should
felt,
be fangirling since you've been involved in so many formative things for me,
yeah,
Chris.
but you're a hero, okay?
No,
Uh,
no.
First of all, as I said to them earlier, I have to apologize. I spent days setting up my Zoom background at my home here in Hawaii, but
Right.
my neighbors suddenly started doing construction today, and I was like, oh no, I can't do it here. So I had to rush to the office. So I apologize for my plain background. I have no fancy kitchen or lanai or flowers and everything.
No,
So
I can tell it's Hawaiian. There's something about just the vibe of it that feels Hawaiian.
exactly. But I think you're the
No.
first openly Asian player on Saturday Night Live,
There you
and
go.
obviously it's sort of the pinnacle of comedy, but it's also the springboard to comedy sainthood. And I'm just curious, can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
To SNL, yeah, absolutely. It was pretty protracted and it remains very sort of ever winding and really interesting. I grew up watching the show religiously. I mean, I forsook social events and social interactions with friends on Saturday nights just to stay in and watch. Um, just because there was something so New York about the show, and it just seemed so aspirational for me as this kid to see things happen in this studio in this city, in the studio in this building in this city. I mean, like every single sort of layer of it seems so fascinating to me. So I just grew up really watching the show, but never really told myself that I would um, be involved in any way. Just because, I mean, just with the very sort of well-trod thing around representation, unless you see yourself, you don't sort of envision that or visualize that. You can't really extrapolate for yourself in your mind to like insert yourself in that place. So I just kind of had aspirations to comedy that sort of got sidetracked and sort of marginalized and then came back in. And by the time I, kind of committed to just performing comedy, um, after several years, had the opportunity to submit a tape, which is normally how this audition process starts. And then from there, you get invited to do a showcase, which is what happened. And then at the showcase, I kind of operated on the mentality of it never happening. I was like, there's no way they would ever hire like this femme, gay, Asian guy on the show. So I might as well just have fun with it. So I just kind of threw any sort of respectability or caution to the wind and just kind of did what was fun for me. And then that sort of bewilderingly got me like further and further along into the process. And so that I screen tested one summer and then got turned down. I got to meet with Lauren that summer of 2017, got turned down, spent a year sort of licking my wounds. But then in March of 2018, got asked to come back in for maybe a mid-season hire. Didn't get that, but then came back in August of that year to audition again. And by that time, I was able to meet with Lauren a second time in that sort of final vetting round. And then at that point, he offered me a writing position because I think his mentality was that anybody with my sort of demographic labels would be very closely scrutinized if they were put on camera. Um, and so I think he wanted me to learn sort of the production ropes and the writing ropes and the creative ropes. And I feel like that instinct was correct of him to sort of have me understand how the show operated so that I could, if I was a cultural fit at the show after one season or two seasons or however many seasons, he would think, okay, maybe he's appropriate for an on-camera thing where he is set up for success. Um, and I think that ultimately bore out nicely. So that's kind of the whole journey. And then I've just been on for one season.
And 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 were you actually born in Australia? Is that?
Yeah. I was born in Brisbane. And then 6 months later, in about March of 91, I was born in November of 1990, and then March of 91, my family picked up and moved to Canada, to
uh,
Ontario, and then to Quebec.
So the family has a remarkable global story to begin with.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And from like very sort of unassuming roots, I would say. My dad, I grew up very rural, um, and in this rural town, and was the first in his family to be literate and then go to college. So the reason why my parents were in Australia was because my dad was getting his doctorate in a a STEM line of work, and then but I feel like he was also sort of right place, right time, where he was at his age coming right after the Cultural Revolution, where they were allowing students to travel outside of China to study, and so I feel like I feel like where I've ended up is just um, thanks to like all these serendipitous things that have happened in sequence.
Yeah. And your mom is very accomplished too. She's a doctor.
She was a doctor, yeah. So she was a doctor in mainland China, and then lost her license when when they moved to Australia and then Canada. But she's still she's about to retire, but she's been working in the medical field for her whole life, and um, yeah. So I grew up around these two very cerebral, very STEMmy parents.
I've seen in previous interviews you have talked about the fact that you did go to conversion therapy on their behalf.
Hmm.
Can you chat about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like it's a more common story um than it might seem. I feel like it's not totally unique to me, but I I sort of was found out to be gay by my parents. I did not come out on my own terms, and then from there, I mean, like I said, these are two STEM solution oriented people, and so culturally, they had never really encountered this in China. Um,
Mm,
where my dad sort of kept bringing up the fact that, well, no one where he's from is gay. No one from his town is gay. And I was like, Dad, that's not true. They probably just didn't make you specifically aware of the fact that they were gay. I mean, there's no way you can sort of, you know, take, a sexuality census of your hometown and say for a fact that there were no queer people. But they just had these sort of very dyed in the wool ideas about sexuality, and I feel like that was just a cultural thing. It wasn't really religiously motivated when they sent me to conversion therapy, but it was this solution that was sort of offered up to them. My dad did his research and kind of saw what he wanted to see, and then found um, these counselors in Colorado Springs, which is this very sort of mega churchy town in Colorado. Is a 2-hour drive from the suburban Denver area that I grew up in. And so that was this thing where I had never seen my parents so distressed before. And so I sort of went along with um, this sort of kind of way out of the predicament that they found themselves in, that we all found ourselves in, because I didn't have any sort of fortitude in my sexuality or in my identity to know that, like, or to sort of push back and be like, well, no, this is who I am. And you either, um, and I can, and these are the ways that you can accept it. And these are the ways that we can cope with it and move on. Like, I didn't have those mechanisms, at my disposal back then. So I did it. I did it for about 8 weeks, 8 sessions, the summer before I went to college. And then I ended up going to, I mean, the funny sort of ironic twist ending to this is that I went to NYU to go study with, my sister was already at NYU, just one of the gayest private universities in this country. Then and then from there, I spent like a couple of years back in the closet, and then had to sort of,
mm.
yeah, I know. I gotta say, I made a genuine attempt at being ex-gay, as they call it in that community. So I tried it on for size, didn't work out, and here I am.
Yeah. So what would be sort of your message to, kids that were your age, essentially dealing
Hmm.
with some of the same issues in terms of, I mean, you made a decision to accede to your parents' wishes, and, we hear a lot of stories about kids having to run away because of it, or, and ultimately, I'm going to assume you have a happy ending here in terms of your relationship with your family and your parents.
Hmm.
But that's not always the case, unfortunately. And that's,
No, no. There's just the concept of coming out is so universal, but it's also so specific. It's this thing that sort of all queer people have to sort of go through at one point in various sort of
mhm,
layered stages. You come out to your close friends or your family, and then you sort of have to like widen out in concentric circles to like other people, like your coworkers or your or strangers or whatever. So it's this sort of repetitive process, uh, and it ends up being so particular to anyone's circumstance. And so, as far as Asian youth go, or just queer youth in general, I feel like um, the sort of best recourse for me in that moment was would have been a community, and I feel like back then it was hard to find that, but now I feel like it's relatively more accessible to sort of kind of create a group of people that you can confide in case things sort of become dire. And it's a matter of survival sometimes with certain youth. So the more you can buttress yourself in your life, in case things don't go over well with that process, I think the more secure those people would feel.
yeah. So, you're very young and you're just getting started, but you've opened up a lot of doors for other people. I'm curious who opened up doors for you.
Oh wow. Lots of people. Um, I'll start at SNL. I mean, you had Terry Sweeney, who was the first openly gay male um, actor on TV, just period. I mean, he was the first openly gay male person on network television. And he kind of just broke the seal in so many ways where, um, you know, things have sort of been layered on that breakthrough. But and then at SNL, there's just been such a long history of queer writers there who have kind of pushed the edges and the margins, you know, closer to the center. So you've had like Paula Pell, or you've had James Anderson, or Jeremy Byler, or Chris Kelly, or Julio Torres, or Sam J, or Allison Gates, or I mean, there's just so many people that have come through that place that were able to sort of filter their sensibilities through their queerness. And I feel like I stand on their shoulders anytime I put something that's sort of outwardly queer on the show. In terms of Asian people, it's been BD Wong, who's sort of become this mentor, but then, I mean, wildly, he's become this friend too, where he's just been able to allow both of us to become very vulnerable with each other in ways that I would have never expected from someone like him, someone who is as accomplished as him. Um, and, uh, just kind of, I mean, I feel like I grew up watching Margaret Cho specials, and I grew up watching um, Bobby Lee on Mad TV. I mean, like, I feel like anytime we frame Asians in comedy within this frame of like there's been this dearth or this like scarcity problem with it. I mean, I feel like that's true, that's valid, but it also um, sort of easily erases a lot of people that have come before sort of the place we're at now, where there have been sort of comedians in the past who have groomed the path forward.
Yeah. So, the last year has been tough on a lot of people for a lot of reasons, but I think it's been particularly tough on Asian Americans in general because
Hmm.
of who's running the country and the whole China virus thing and attacks on Asian Americans. I think you've been involved with some of the efforts to, remind people that we're not a virus.
Hmm.
Has that been part of your work?
Yeah. Yeah. It was something that was very distressing to me at the beginning of the pandemic. Something that I felt like I couldn't really express or make sense of. And then uh, in the month before the pandemic hit, in the US, this author and poet Kathy Park Hong released a book called Minor Feelings. And I read that, and it sort of just broke open all these private thoughts that I had that I thought were just purely personal and purely unique to me. But of course they weren't. Of course, these were things that are experienced by so many Asian Americans. And that sort of galvanized me into just being involved. There's Russell Jung. He's a professor at San Francisco State University who has started who started cataloging all of each instance of an Asian hate crime since the pandemic started. And there's journalists, there's Jeff Yang, there's Anka Yi, who have all sort of contributed from their own disciplines ways to make sense of this. So I just feel like, again, and this is just me coming from my collectivist sort of ideologue place, but I feel like my first instinct was to kind of start conversations over social media with people. I mean, I just put out these feelers to everybody where I was saying like, hey, like this is a really bizarre and challenging and stressful and scary time in these specific ways for Asian Americans, but I feel like there's power in experiencing something together. There's power in talking through these things together, and we're sort of on the back heel of this right now, but I feel like we can kind of move everything forward in this way that is important just in terms of us all making sense of this together. So then that just started a lot of conversations with people who had their version of what I was going through. I mean, it's there are these unique threads, and then there are these universal threads, and in the way that we're all making sense of this. But you know, it's scary, but I feel like if we are all able to land on the overlapping interstitial spaces, then we might be okay.
So I read an interview that you did with Maureen Dowd, which I would find incredibly intimidating to begin with. But among other things, she apparently did some due diligence on you, and she said she asked Alec Baldwin about you, and he said
Mm-hmm.
he seems super smart. He has that edge that some comic actors have that allows them to do both comedy and drama, like Robin Williams. Is that intimidating, and is that where you see your career going?
Oh, it's so intimidating. I would be so lucky to have a career like Robin Williams's. I don't know what that looks like today. I don't know if anybody has it. That was such a nice quote from Alec. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I've kept an open mind thus far. I've had no expectations thus far. Really at any point. I mean, even when I started the season last season, when I was moved to cast, I was like, you know, if I get like a few things in, or if I'm in no sketches at all this season, then at least I will have had this experience. Like at least I will have done this. And you know, I remember the week before I started, I was like, if I get fired after the first show, then like at least I will have like had a taste or whatever. At least I will have had a reference point to like what the show is on this side of things. So I don't really know. I don't really know what I am working towards, which I know sounds odd, but I was talking to Hiro Murai, who is this director. Um
Atlanta.
yes, Atlanta and Barry, and
Yes.
works a lot with Donald Glover. But he and I were talking, and he was like, you know, he's like, I'm not really a goal-oriented person. I was like, I don't think I am either. You know, we were both talking around this idea of sort of falling into things or just following threads of things if they feel interesting, and then inevitably, hopefully, best case scenario, you end up in these really interesting places where you work on interesting projects that you would never have imagined you would have worked on years ago. So I feel like that's how he feels about his sort of, you know, and that's how I feel about it too. I think is what I've realized is that I was never setting out to be on camera even. I was never setting out to be, um, hosting a podcast. I mean, I never really wrote any of these things down or committed these things to some like plan or anything. And so I feel like that's made me very lucky, but it's also served me well as far as being open to whatever journey I end up going on.
Yeah. So before this, all this, you had La Culturista, which I think started 2016 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who Matt Rogers is. You guys work really well together. You also talk so fast. I don't know what you're talking about at the time.
Uh-huh.
But I always feel like somehow I'm more connected to pop culture when I listen to the show. And
That's wonderful.
I wanted to ask you about social media. Are you still off Twitter?
I am. I briefly went back on just to like, uh, I think just to like share my opinions on like a music video or something, and then I deleted my account again. Oh no, I know I went back on because I was on for a couple days, and then the thing that sort of got me off again was I was watching Looney Tunes just in bed at home, just relaxing, and then tweeted something like, "Wow, the Looney Tunes are iconic," and then the replies were filled with people being like, this is not interesting or this is not news or whatever. And I was like, you can't even like make as innocuous a comment as the Looney Tunes are good without like being completely shot down. So I was just like, I was like, there's no need for this. Like, I don't have to like have this exchange with like strangers who like chime in with these like noxious thoughts. So I took it down.
Okay, then I want to ask you about the VMAs then, because I watched them
Mm-hmm.
especially for you, and my husband
Wow,
Peter looked at me and
Chris.
he goes, "These are not. Who are these people? This is not for us." And I said, "Well, that's how I feel when I watch his show. I mean, I listen to
Oh,
the baristas. And I don't know what's going on, but I'm all about
Chris.
BTS. The show seemed to be all about
Lady
Chromatica
Gaga.
and Gaga. It
Yes.
was really the Gaga show more than anything else.
Sure.
But I
Did you
was,
mind that it was? Did you mind that it was the Gaga show? I
no,
didn't
it's
mind.
fine. It was okay, but I just wanted more BTS.
Yes, BTS was
I
wonderful.
don't think it's fair. I mean, they won like 4 awards, but I didn't think it was fair that they weren't even up for Best Video of the Year. And
I know.
There's a whole K-pop video category that they also won. But I kind of
Right.
feel like that's kind of racist in itself. That
Mm-hmm.
the K-pop videos are so great that I don't know. But I was watching the 17th version of Dynamite last night, and my sister caught me,
Sure.
and she goes, "What are you, a 13-year-old girl?" And I said, "Yeah, basically, that's me."
But that's the thing with I mean, that's the thing with K-pop and just with fandoms. It's like it shouldn't be reduced down to like that demographic of 13-year-old girl. It's like we all get excited. I mean, when BTS was at SNL 2 seasons ago, I remember watching them on the monitors in the rehearsal, and then everybody in the writers' room. It was Thursday when we were watching them rehearse. Everybody in the writers' room like straightened up, and they were like, "Oh my god, this is like the '90s again." It's like Backstreet Boys all dancing. It was like they were dancing in sync, and it was just like this like is electrifying, and it doesn't matter what your age is or who you are or what your gender is. It's just like it's entertaining, and it just like is so riveting that you have to watch. Of course, people are obsessed. Anyway, I'm just saying that your sister, can doesn't have to assign that label to it.
I heard your sister was supposed to chaperone you at NYU, so I
She
have a feeling
was.
too.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so you get it.
I think we kept more of your time than we should have, but
That's
it's
okay.
such a pleasure, seriously, an honor to meet you and have this conversation.
Thank you so much, Chris. You had such
Yeah,
thoughtful questions, well-researched questions. So thank you so much. This was such
it
a
was
pleasure
fun.
for me.